This is Mike, and I'm back with my review of the iPhone 11 Professional. Now let's get to it and check it out. Alright, so I got the 5.8-inch Space Gray iPhone 11 Pro on launch day, so it's been a couple weeks since I've had it. I'm going to be honest, this was a difficult phone to review because I had last year's XS, and to me, this phone is really not that much different than the XS, but for some reason I like it a lot more. So I just had to really think about why I like this phone so much more than the XS. And I really thought about it. I went back to the iPhone 10. I thought about the iPhone 10 launch alongside the iPhone 8. And really the 10 kind of felt like it was a test. It was kind of like the beta. They were testing the new design. They were testing Face ID. The XS kind of felt like another refinement of that, but it still felt like a beta. There wasn't enough that was really new about it or improved from the previous iPhones that made it feel like a whole new package. And I think that's where this year's iPhone 11 Pro comes in. It feels like a brand new phone. So let me go over a few of the things that I really like about it. Let's start with the camera. Now I'm not going to go too in depth about the camera. The Pro obviously features 3 cameras, whereas the regular iPhone 11 has the 2. The one camera that this has that the 11 doesn't is the telephoto, so that's basically your 2x zoom for anyone that has an older iPhone. Then you have your standard, which they're now calling the wide, and then you have the ultra wide. The ultra wide, in my opinion, is the biggest change as far as, you're getting that ultra wide perspective. And I know a lot of Android phones have already had this for years, so they're probably like, oh, y'all are late to the party as usual. I'm like, all right, chill, we late. I know we late. iPhone users were always late, but Apple really did it right. That made it super easy. They just added basically another notch on there, kind of like when you switch over to the telephoto, it's like another option. You just slide right over, and then boom, you're in the ultra wide. The other thing that they added was night mode, and I've been having a lot of fun with that. It really does make a huge difference. I am curious about trying it on the Pixel. I haven't personally tried it. I heard it's a little bit different, but I think Apple really does a great job of brightening up those night shots, but still keeping them looking natural. Other than that, though, the improvements on the camera, while they are subtle, it does make a big difference. Like, it feels like the lenses are able to take in a lot more light. My shots have just been brighter. Like, my house generally is pretty dim, but I've been getting significantly better shots than I got on the XS or the 7 Plus that I had before that. So I think the cameras are greatly improved. To me, it's not a real reason to buy the 11 Pro unless you really like having the telephoto lens and having the optical zoom, which is obviously better quality than zooming in digitally like you would have to do with the iPhone 11. When you do a digital zoom, they're taking that standard wide angle picture and you're cropping it, so you're kind of just zooming in on that picture. Whereas optical, you're switching to a different lens, so you're just getting it from that directly from that lens. You're not actually cropping the picture. You're getting it from a different perspective, something that's actually able to see the subject closer. So it is higher quality, but it's not a real sticking point to me as far as picking the Pro over the regular 11. Like I said, I'm not going to go into great detail about the cameras. I like it, but it's just one of the many things that I like about this phone, and I kind of want to go through all of them. The next thing I would have to say is the processor bump. So I didn't think going from the A12 to the A13 I would see that big of a difference. I kind of felt like when I went from my 7 Plus to the XS Max last year, it was like, okay, it's a little bit faster, but it's alright. I think the one thing that changed from last year to this year, though, is I started using my widgets a lot more on the XS Max. So when I switched over to this phone and I swiped over to the widgets, I was like, wow, this loads a lot faster. And it's not, it's a hair faster on everything else, but the widgets to me, it kind of made a big difference. You're talking about 3 to 5 seconds, which doesn't seem like a lot, but when you're using something every day and you kind of get used to the way that it works, it's a lot. It makes a difference. I'm just saying, like, to me, that's half my work day, waiting on widgets. I can get so much more stuff done. Now I ain't gotta wait for it. And of course, with that being said, the processor is also more efficient on battery, not to mention Apple was able to squeeze a bigger battery into the phone. So with the Pro versus the XS, the XS Max last year, the regular Pro has 4 more hours of battery life. the Max has 5 more hours of battery life compared to their counterparts from last year. To me, the battery life wasn't the biggest thing because I was never like, I wasn't redlining everything. My little battery icon wasn't red every day. I'd say that, by the end of the day, before I charged it, it was probably like around 30%. Now it's usually around 50% battery remaining. And there's been a few times that I've placed my phone on the wireless charger incorrectly thanks to this huge bump on the back of the case. It's not the phone's fault, it's this case. But yeah, I woke up, my phone was not charged. I've been fine for like half the day before I even think about charging it. One of the bigger things for me was Face ID. Now I know Apple mentioned that, they improved it, it's faster, it works from different angles. And a lot of the other reviews said they didn't notice the difference. Well, being that I live with this phone with Face ID for over a year now, I definitely noticed a difference. Like, I feel like when I have this on my lap 75% of the time, I can just glance down and like tap the phone, glance down, and it unlocks it. That really didn't happen that much with the XS Max. The iPad Pro is also very good with different angles for the Face ID, and I feel like this is kind of on par with the iPad Pro. In my opinion, it's a little change. Most people probably won't notice it, but I definitely noticed it. Also, I've been a huge proponent for Face ID over Touch ID because I never liked Touch ID. I know I'm weird. I'm just one of those people. I never liked it. It never worked well for me. I don't know, my hands are always sweaty or oily or something. My Jerry Curl juice was dripping on the phone and just caused it not to work right. I don't know. It just didn't work for me. So I like the improved Face ID. Give me more of that, Apple. One other improvement that's not really talked about that much, the phone does support Wi-Fi 6, which is the newest standard for Wi-Fi. So the way it works is you still connect to the same networks, either your 2.4 gigahertz or 5G, which basically can communicate with devices more efficiently, multiple devices. It's able to send and receive more data simultaneously than previous Wi-Fi standards. So theoretically, you should see a boost. Now, I do have a Wi-Fi 6 router. I do have a gigabit connection. And I'll honestly say it doesn't make that much of a difference versus just using the 5 gigahertz connection on my XS or XS Max from last year. The highest speed test I probably got on the XS Max last year was around 460 megabits. This one got a little over 500 megabits max speed. So it's a little bit of a difference, but it's definitely not a reason to go out and buy a new phone if you're thinking about it. And also, Wi-Fi 6 routers right now are pretty expensive, so it's probably not worth investing in just for the Wi-Fi 6, but it is a nice added feature to have. One of the other improvements that I'm kind of like neutral about is the improved OLED screen. They even called it the Super Retina XDR display. It's the best display ever on an iPhone. That's great. To me, the XS and the XS Max last year and this phone look exactly the same screen-wise. So it's not really, and yes, I did watch some 4K HDR content up here. It's like I did on my phone last year. It looks really good. I'm not saying that it looks bad or anything. I'm just saying like I didn't see the difference. I mean, granted, I do use a TN panel for my Windows computer, so I'm not the best judge of color and all that stuff. But I did notice the bump in processor speed and the Face ID stuff. But I haven't really noticed the difference with the screen. I'm just saying, like, it is what it is. Another thing I forgot to mention earlier, speakers are way improved in this phone. They talked about the virtual surround sound. I see what they were going for. It kind of has a more distant sound, like it sounds like it's not coming exactly from the phone, like they try to create this virtual effect. It doesn't fully work, but either way the phone still sounds a lot better. Alright, so I talked about everything I like so far, so let's go into some of the cons. So the biggest thing for me, and I was real hyped about this last year, when the iPad Pro dropped and it had USB-C, I was like, man, they gotta bring it to the phone because the iPad Pro with USB-C is amazing. And the reason why, a lot of people maybe don't understand, but I really didn't get into this until last year when they announced the iPad Pro with USB-C. There is actually a Lightning to USB-A adapter, so you can plug cameras and whatever into your iPhone or previous iPad, but there are certain things that you plug into it that require additional power. And to do that, you basically have to get the big USB adapter that also accepts the Lightning and the headphone jack. That's way more money. You have to have it plugged into power while you use a powered USB device. So for instance, I have a microphone interface. When I tried it on the 2017 iPad Pro with the USB adapter, it wouldn't work. It said it was drawing too much power because it doesn't have any external power. It gets all its power through USB. The only way I could get it to work was to basically, get one of the adapters where it splits the power. And then, so I had to have power. You had to have USB connected with the USB adapter, and then power connected to that adapter, so the phone was getting power to give it enough power. On the iPad Pro, I've literally taken a USB extender. I've had a mic headphone adapter plugged in, my audio interface plugged in, and a keyboard plugged in. None of these run off of external power. They're all just running off of USB, and they all work perfectly fine just off of the USB-C port on the iPad Pro. So it'd be great to see that compatibility with the iPhone, especially with the Pro this year. I feel like that was a missed opportunity, considering that they're charging $300 more than the base model iPhone. And another con is with the ultra wide lens. I love it so much. Like, it's my favorite new toy, and you can take all kinds of crazy shots with it. But it is very easy to get your finger, especially in a smaller phone like this, to kind of get your finger in the way and not get caught in the shot. Or for instance, when I'm using my gimbal with the ultra wide lens, it's always on the shot. There's not really any adjustment I can make to it for it to not be in the shot. So that's just something to be aware of. Also, anything that's close to the edges of the photo, or the frame, is going to be distorted. That's just with any ultra wide lens. So it's probably best for like landscape and group shots. But if you're like me, then I like to have a little fun with it. You can use that distortion to kind of play with. It's a fun feature. That's just kind of one of the cons. You really have to watch out to make sure that your finger is not in the shot, especially with a smaller phone. Another thing is the Pro name. So I get where Apple's going. The name makes sense. It makes sense with their product line. I think last year having the 10R and then the 10S really didn't make that much sense. I think it was kind of confusing to people. This year, just having the 11 and 11 Pro, the name makes a lot more sense. But it would have been nice to see some features in the operating system. I'm not talking about like, improved hardware. It does offer the OLED screen. It does offer the telephoto lens. It has the fast charger in the box. Cool. But $300 is a big price difference. And there's no software optimization to really take advantage of whatever the Pro is offering, which is basically not much in comparison to the regular iPhone. So that's my biggest gripe with it. I really want to see if Apple's going to continue this Pro thing, for them to do a Pro version of iOS and bring some other features to kind of justify this price point. Of course, another thing is the price in general. It still starts off at $1,000 for 64 gigs of storage, which is kind of ridiculous. The Pro Max starts off at $1,100 basically. And then realistically, if you're going to go up to 256, which I feel like a lot of people, especially if you're an upgrader, you're probably going to have to jump up to that. I got the 256 gig because I can't do 64 gigs anymore. I have too much stuff on my phone. So when you jump up to that adds an extra $100. So realistically, an upgrader is probably going to spend $1,100 for the 5.8 or $1,200 for the Max. And I just think that that's too much, considering that these phones aren't offering many more features than what the base iPhone 11 is offering. I know one more thing that people might bring up as a con, and that's going to be the notch / the design. I didn't really go over the design in this video. It's really unchanged from last year, aside from the cameras in the back. I personally like the design. The notch doesn't bother me, so I don't see it as a con. But it's just worth mentioning because I know a lot of people, it may bother them, especially because some Android phones have found creative ways to get rid of the notch. I'm perfectly fine with it. It doesn't bother me one way or the other. I just wanted to mention it. So in conclusion, the iPhone 11 Pro is definitely the best phone that Apple's ever made. I feel like it is the iPhone 10 concept at its full maturity. I feel like they ironed out a lot of the things that weren't so great about it. This year it feels like a complete phone. Like, it feels like this is the definitive version of this design. Like, this is the pinnacle. But this phone is definitely not for everybody. And I think that Apple was smart this year, and they marketed the iPhone 11 as being the phone for everybody. Whereas, like, kind of like last year, the 10R was kind of like the off to the side thing, like, oh, we made this cheap phone, but look at this 10S Max. And then nobody bought it, and everybody bought the cheap phone. So they learned from last year, and they made that iPhone 11 the mainstream option. And I think having that ultra wide and standard lens on there is great, is good enough for most people. Like, and the display still looks great, even though it's not an OLED, even though it's technically a little bit above 720p. It's still a great looking display, and most people probably won't even tell just glancing at the phone if it's a Pro or an 11. And that's why it makes it such a hard sell. I think for people that want the absolute best camera, then yes, this makes sense. If you watch high quality movies on your phone, then yes, this is probably the best phone to get because you're going to get HDR, all that jazz. But yes, this is the best phone for a certain person. I think the best phone for most people is probably the 11, which is also great. Jeff has one. I'm going to do a quick review of it next week, just to kind of give you a rundown. Because I feel like I went over a lot in this review, so I'd be kind of repeating the same stuff. But I'm going to give you the reasons why the iPhone 11 is probably the best choice next week. But if you enjoyed this video, make sure to tell a friend, tell a coworker, like, share, and subscribe, and always do at least 2 things at the same time. Peace.